The Lamar Jackson deadline is today, 3:30 Eastern, for the Ravens to make a decision on which of the two tags they want to use. Now, by the time you may hear this, that decision could be made. If you're on it early, the decision may not be made. I don't know if it's going to go right to 3:30 Eastern. I thought it was interesting that a team source said recently, he's like, we've been working on this for 25 months. So, we're not going to wake up on Tuesday and go, oh, wait, that's today. So let's go over the two different tags that we have and discuss Lamar in a bigger picture thing here, because I just think this whole stuff gets really interesting. There's an exclusive tag where the Ravens just have his rights, and he's $45 million for next year. Simple, right? There's a non-exclusive tag where that comes in at a lot cheaper at $32.4 million, but that also means that Lamar can talk to other teams and he can sign an offer sheet. Now, he could sign the offer sheet and the Ravens could just match it and save some money, which maybe some would argue that's the way to go. I would argue that maybe you just give them the $45 million because you've gone through all this kind of stuff just to make everybody feel a little bit better about it. But then again, depending on how your cap space plays out, maybe that seems like it's pointless because you could have had him control and match the offer sheet and keep him at 32.4. Like basically, as I'm saying this all, it's just trying to understand, okay, well, they did this because of this or they did this because of that. Now, if he signs an offer sheet with another team and the Ravens go, you know what? I think we're good. I don't think we're even close on the guaranteed money and what you want for a long-term deal, which would be, a big deal. But a lot of times it's like if you're any good as a quarterback, you just get paid more than everybody else because you're up later than the other guys. That's kind of the history of how that position has been paid. It's not always just based on who you are. And when you look at some of the other quarterbacks that have been paid, whether it's Kyler, although Russell Wilson, people can laugh at the contract now, but I think at the time you kind of understood it, even though it was done ahead of time. Some of these Daniel Jones numbers sound absurd, where I think some of those numbers you go, you know what, maybe we just don't do this. But you're always afraid of, okay, you cannot do it, but then what's your backup plan? So if the Ravens were to say, hey, okay, you know what? We're actually not going to match that offer sheet. They get 2 first-round picks. I think who signs him also factors into trying to figure out what those first-rounders would be. All right, so they have a bunch of different options. Ozzie Newsome said yesterday on the Bernie Kosar show, shout out to Bernie Kosar, by the way, quote, we're trying to get a deal done, and then paraphrasing here, again, quote, if not, we'll put the franchise tag on him, okay? But again, it is which one. So the Lamar debate has been a big topic for him going all the way back to the draft. Bill Polian said some shit nobody likes. Booger McFarland admitted he was wrong about him as a quarterback. He goes and wins an MVP, and he is, I think, just outside of that top tier of guys, which is not a huge insult. Whenever we're talking about like all-time great basketball players, you're like, I have this guy 6th, I have this guy 7th. Somebody's like, I can't believe that. The disrespect never ends. You're like, I'm saying he's better than everyone that's ever played except for like 6 people. So I don't think that's the most disrespectful thing you can say is about somebody. And I know when Sandoz quarterback tiers came out at the beginning of the year, that gets turned into this like content fucking waterworks where it's like, all right, I can't believe this guy said, what, you can't believe somebody said that he's the 6th best, 7th best quarterback in the NFL? Because that's really what we're talking about. But I do think that there's always, the part that's fascinating is when it comes to quarterbacks in general, the decisions teams make about a player they have in a building, they have going through all the reps for multiple years, and then them making a decision to move on from that quarterback. And then that makes me wonder, wait, does this end the debate? Like if a bunch of people liked a quarterback a lot, or a bunch of people had him ranked here or didn't have him ranked as high, when a team and the coaching staff who's had the quarterback around for multiple years, if they're okay moving on from that player, should that end the debate about the player? Now, to repeat once again, Lamar is better than some of these quarterbacks that I'm going to go back and look at historically. So that's not really the case. And you're always a little afraid of digging into anything that feels like you're being critical of Lamar Jackson just because the way, content seems to work lately. It's like seeing or being one of those guys who's like, the WNBA doesn't make a ton of money. And then your friends are like, no, you're one of those guys. It's like, what guys? Like a guy that points out something? Yeah, I wouldn't tweet that dude. So yeah, the Lamar debate ends up becoming a bunch of different things when I'm just really interested in where his contract's going to land and what decision Baltimore ends up making with him if they'd actually let him move on. Let's look back historically again at some of the guys that moved on. Like I think a lot of us looked at Jared Goff and you're like, is he really that good? And then you heard the stories about how McVay was basically telling him what the coverage is and where the throw was supposed to go before every single snap. Now they went and paid him a ton of money. And I thought the Rams were kind of weird in the way they publicly justified it. They were saying, well, he really handled himself well after that loss to the Patriots. All right, well, it's a chance they got to move on from him. They did. They won a Super Bowl. That's a win for McVay. All right. So Goff has been better now, but I think a lot of those Goff years with Los Angeles where it's like, how good is this guy actually going to be? And then they decide to move on from him. I think that's a very telling thing. The same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. The record is really good. I thought he was kind of overrated in the beginning because when I'd look at him get the win as a starting quarterback and then watch how the game played out, I was like, I really don't know that I had that much to do with him. And then when Shanahan moves 3 picks to take a quarterback who didn't even play basically his senior year because of everything that happened with COVID, I'm like, I think that's a tell. I mean, how many different times did he try to move on from Garoppolo? Although I'm arguing with a buddy right now about Shanahan. He thinks he's the worst coach of all time because of the NFC title game. And I'm like, I don't know. He had a fullback warming up on the sideline. So I'm not sure that's the best example to say that Shanahan isn't that good. But there's a lot of people out there that think Shanahan's actually like this completely fraudulent coach. I think the decision to move on from Garoppolo, we don't have the result yet like the Rams do, but I think it's really telling. I love this one because Kirk Cousins was with Washington. Jay Gruden was there. Cousins as a starter, they went 9-7, 8-7, 7-9. The first year they got rid of him, they went 7-9 again. Again, it's not always one loss on quarterbacks, but it was very clear the front office and Gruden were like, he's all right, but we don't want to pay him this kind of money. Ended up being an absolute historic windfall for Cousins because he got tagged again, I believe, and then got all that guaranteed money from Minnesota, and their cap thing was so messed up, they had to keep giving him more guaranteed money on top of everything else. But we've spent a lot of time talking about Kirk Cousins, and I feel like that's part of the history and should always be part of the discussion. The team that didn't even have the option was like, nah, we just don't really want to pay you. I think it's one of the few things that Washington's done as a football team where I was like, I kind of respect that. This one always bums out Cerruti when I bring it up. It happened to Alex Smith twice. I was always kind of like a shrug to Alex Smith guy. You know, that year they won 13 games in San Francisco. Akers kicked 52 field goals, and they were in the bottom third of teams on third down conversions. There's some other conversion numbers there for Smith that are even worse. I think Jim Harbaugh in that moment was like, I need more juice at the position. I got to figure something else out here. And he went with Kaepernick. It happened to Smith again with Andy Reid. Granted, it was for Mahomes. Smith got to play that year. He was good. He was better in that year. And they'd always put up that Monday night graphic of like all the win-losses, and it'd be like Brady, Manning, and then Alex Smith. But it happened to Smith twice, and I think both cases you understood why. There's some other ones that aren't as good. You know, Arians moving on from Winston to Tom Brady. I think a lot of people would have done that. Ironically, when you stay on Brady and making a decision at quarterback, Belichick comes up historically as one of the worst decisions you could make because he wanted to get ahead of it and move ahead off of Brady and had no backup plan whatsoever. That's been covered. There's total flameouts that just weren't good enough, whether it's a first-round bust like a Sam Darnold or Bortles who's around, looks like he's going to be okay. It doesn't work out. Baker, the same type of stuff. Lamar is much better than all of these guys, all right? I think I've said it 3 times just to make sure everybody is on the same page here. But whenever a decision has to be made about a quarterback financially, there are average to above average QBs that just get paid. They just get their money. And so there's a few things at work here. Is it the injuries and projecting how healthy he would be moving forward? And that's the hesitation with paying him, which could be the reason, and it would be a viable one. It could be the money that Lamar is like, nope, I want the Deshaun money. And the Deshaun thing is unfortunate in that somebody who was in trouble was then rewarded, but that's the way it worked. He fell into a very, very specific slot that is almost unheard of, and certainly with the money, historically unheard of. Cleveland didn't want to lose him to Atlanta. They guaranteed the whole $250 million, and that's the way it works. So unless you want to get in a lot of trouble and then become a free agent, which I don't know if that's necessarily worth it, but it was financially for Watson. The Kyler money is absurd. The guarantee's there. At least with Wilson, he had a resume. Kyler, good luck with that contract. And so if you're Lamar, you at least have to be thinking, well, if he got that and I have an MVP and I'm just a better player, then I should be able to get $189 million guaranteed on this new deal. So it could be the money, or could we possibly allow ourselves this? And I know this will probably be shot down. Again, if you like Lamar, you're never going to allow this to even creep into the debate about him. Is it anything that Baltimore's telling us where it's like, yeah, we really like him. We think he's really good, but we don't think he's one of those guys. And we aren't going to do business that way. We're going to find out this week.